There is a moment, and most of us have had one, where we looked at someone and decided, in less than 3 seconds, exactly who they were. We didn't ask questions. We didn't wonder about their story. We just looked at what they were wearing, what they were carrying, what they were doing, and we made up our minds. This is a story about that moment, and about what happens when life forces you to look again. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was a warm Thursday morning in late May when Marcus Cole walked across a graduation stage in front of 400 people and felt, for the first time in his 22 years of life, completely untouchable. The auditorium at Harrington Academy in suburban Connecticut smelled like fresh flowers and expensive cologne. Sunlight poured through the tall, arched windows. Parents stood holding phones and wiping tears. It was one of those mornings that feels like a movie, and Marcus Cole intended to be the star of it. He was tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in a custom navy suit underneath his graduation gown. His shoes were Italian leather. His watch, a gift from his father, cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut, the only child of Raymond Cole, a man who had built a small empire developing luxury real estate along the New England coastline. Marcus had never taken public transportation. He had never worked a part-time job. He had never, not once in his life, been told the word no and had to accept it. He wasn't a monster. People who knew him well would tell you that. He could be charming. He could be funny. He remembered birthdays and held doors open when he felt like it. But there was a layer beneath the charm, a quiet, settled belief that the world was already organized the way it should be, that some people were simply born into a different category. And Marcus Cole had never once questioned which category he belonged to. Raymond Cole had enrolled his son at Harrington Academy when Marcus was just 6 years old. It was the kind of school where tuition ran $38,000 a year, where the alumni network included senators and surgeons and one former Secretary of State. Raymond had made sacrifices to get Marcus in, not financial sacrifices, those came easy, but the social kind. The handshakes at the right dinners. The right donation at the right time to the school's capital campaign. Raymond understood that access was its own currency, and he spent it deliberately. Marcus grew up inside Harrington's brick walls like he owned them. And because no one ever told him otherwise, a part of him believed he did. He knew the security guards by name, but rarely asked how they were doing. He waved at the cafeteria workers, but never learned theirs. And then there was the janitor, the quiet, older black man who had worked at Harrington for as long as anyone could remember. Marcus had seen him every single school day for 16 years, and had never once thought to learn his name. His name was Walter James. Walter James arrived at Harrington Academy every morning at 5:45, not because he had to. His shift started at 6:30. But Walter was the kind of man who believed that if a thing was worth doing, it was worth doing before anyone was watching. He would unlock the side entrance, brew a pot of coffee in the small maintenance office, and walked the hallways alone in the quiet. He swept the entrance foyer. He checked the bathroom fixtures. He replaced burnt-out bulbs before the first teacher even arrived. By the time students were pouring through the front doors, the school was already clean, already warm, already ready, and Walter was already invisible. He was 61 years old. He had a calm face, the kind of face that didn't give much away unless you were paying attention. He wore the same faded navy work uniform every day, his name stitched in small yellow letters above the breast pocket. He ate lunch alone in the maintenance room, usually a sandwich he packed himself. He never complained. He never raised his voice. And in 16 years, not one student had ever asked him a single personal question. Not one. But the faculty knew something the students didn't. Principal Donna Abernethy knew. The head of accounting knew. The school's legal counsel knew. And they had all agreed, years ago, to keep it that way, because that was what Walter James had asked them to do. Now think about that for a second. Think about someone in your own life. Someone you pass every day. Someone whose face you recognize, but whose story you have never once thought to ask about. How many Walter Jameses have walked through your life while you were looking at your phone? This story is for every one of them. The graduation ceremony began at 10 in the morning. By 9:15, the auditorium was already filling up. Parents and grandparents filed into the rows of padded seats. The faculty lined up in the hallway in their academic robes. Students gathered in the gymnasium, loud and giddy, snapping photos and signing each other's programs. Marcus stood near the center of the group, easy and confident, talking to his friends the way people talk when they know they're being watched and enjoy it. Walter was working that morning like any other morning. He was moving through the corridor adjacent to the auditorium, collecting stray programs that had been dropped on the floor, straightening the folding tables near the reception area, making sure the post-ceremony refreshments were set up neatly. He moved quietly, methodically, the way he always did. A few parents glanced at him. No one spoke to him. The ceremony itself was beautiful. The student orchestra played. The valedictorian, a soft-spoken girl named Priya whose parents had emigrated from India and who had earned a full scholarship to Yale, gave a speech about gratitude that made half the auditorium cry. Principal Abernethy spoke about character, about what Harrington graduates owed the world, about humility. At the time, Marcus listened with the polite, slightly bored expression of someone sitting through a sermon they don't think applies to them. His name was called. He walked across the stage. He shook the principal's hand. He smiled at the cameras. He pumped his fist once, just enough to get the crowd going, and walked off the other side. His father was on his feet in the second row, clapping so hard his palms turned red. It happened about 40 minutes after the ceremony ended, during the informal milling around period when families were finding each other and students were taking photos on the lawn and the catering staff was beginning to break down the refreshment tables. Marcus was near the side hallway with 3 of his friends, Tyler, Brandon, and a kid everyone called Spence, when he spotted Walter pushing a wide floor mop toward the auditorium entrance. Marcus was feeling good. He was feeling the particular kind of loose, confident warmth that comes from being applauded and photographed and told repeatedly that your whole future is ahead of you. His tie was loosened. He had a plastic cup of sparkling cider in his hand. And when he saw Walter, this man he had seen 10,000 times without ever really seeing, something small and careless moved through him. "Hey," he called out. Not mean exactly. The way you call out to someone when you're performing for an audience. "Busy day for you, huh? Don't worry. We'll try not to make too much more of a mess." His friends laughed. Walter paused with the mop handle in both hands and looked at Marcus calmly. He didn't respond. Marcus, emboldened, kept going. 16 years, man. You've been mopping these floors since I was in first grade. You ever think about doing something else?" He gestured vaguely, like something with more of a future. There was an edge in it now. Not loud. Marcus was too polished for loud, but it was there. That quiet implication. That casual dismissal of an entire human life. Tyler and Brandon exchanged a glance. Spence looked at the floor. Walter James looked at Marcus for a long moment. His expression didn't change. He said, quietly, "I'm doing exactly what I chose to do." Then he turned and pushed the mop forward and continued down the hallway. That should have been the end of it. It would have been the end of it, forgotten by lunch, buried under the noise of a graduation party, if Principal Abernethy hadn't been standing 12 feet away at the hallway entrance, holding a folder of programs, watching the whole thing. She didn't say anything immediately. That was what struck people later, how composed she was. She watched Marcus laugh with his friends. She watched Walter disappear around the corner. And then she closed the folder, straightened her robe, and walked back toward the auditorium podium, where the microphone was still live for post-ceremony announcements. She tapped it once. The feedback whine cut through the noise, and the room gradually went quiet. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a few more minutes," she said. Her voice was steady. "Before we close out today's ceremony, there is something I'd like to share. Something that is long overdue." People shuffled back into the auditorium. Some were still holding plates of food. Parents looked at each other with mild curiosity. Marcus and his friends drifted in near the back, vaguely interested. This school, Principal Abernethy began, was founded in 1953. Most of you know that. What fewer people know is that in 1999, 26 years ago, Harrington Academy nearly ceased to exist. The room shifted. A few older parents leaned forward. We had been through a difficult decade. Enrollment had dropped. An expensive renovation had gone over budget. Legal costs from a facilities dispute had drained our reserves. By the spring of 1999, we were facing the real possibility of shutting our doors permanently. The board had explored every option. We had exhausted most of them. She paused and looked at the far door. And then a man came into my predecessor's office, Principal Gerald Watts, for those of you who remember him, and made an offer. He offered to cover the school's outstanding debt, fund a 10-year endowment, and establish a scholarship program for students whose families couldn't afford Harrington's tuition. 12 scholarships per graduating class, fully funded, every year. The room was very quiet now. He had two conditions. The first was that his name never appear on any building, any plaque, or any public document associated with the donation. The second condition. She stopped. She pressed her lips together the way people do when they're carrying the weight of something for a long time and finally setting it down. The second condition was that he be permitted to work here. Not as a board member. Not as an administrator. He wanted to work in the building. He said, and I'm quoting directly from the letter he sent to Principal Watts, "I want to stay connected to what education actually looks like. I want to be useful in a simple, honest way. I want to work with my hands." You could have heard a pin drop. "That man," she said, "has worked at this school every day for the past 23 years. He has arrived before the sun comes up. He has fixed what was broken, cleaned what was dirty, and kept this building standing, literally and financially. He has watched more than 2,000 students walk across that stage. And in all that time, he has never, not once, mentioned to any of you what he did." She looked toward the side hallway. "Walter," she said into the microphone, "would you please come in?" There was a pause, and then Walter James appeared at the hallway door, still in his uniform, still holding the mop handle loosely in one hand. He looked around the room with that same calm, unreadable expression. He took a few steps forward and stopped. Someone began to clap, then another person, then a third. Within 10 seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. Not politely, not for ceremony, but the way people stand when something true has just walked into the room and they don't know what else to do with what they're feeling. Walter looked slightly embarrassed. He raised one hand in a small, quiet acknowledgement and nodded. Marcus Cole was standing in the back of the room, and the clapping around him felt far away. He was staring at Walter, at this man he had mocked 40 minutes ago, this man he had been dismissing for 16 years with the casual ease of someone who had never been asked to look closely at anything. And something was moving through his chest that he didn't have a word for yet. Not shame exactly. Deeper than shame. It was the specific pain of realizing you had been seeing the world wrong for a very long time, and the wrongness wasn't just an accident. It was something you had chosen because it was easier. Principal Abernethy wasn't finished. "I also want to add one more detail," because I think it's relevant given what I observed in this hallway a short while ago." Her eyes found Marcus in the back of the room. She didn't point. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him for a moment, and then looked away. Several families in this room received Harrington scholarships. I won't name them. That's private. But I will say that 3 students in today's graduating class could not have been here without Walter's endowment. They know who they are. I'd ask them to simply remember it. Then she turned directly to Walter. "On behalf of every student who ever walked these halls, every teacher who ever stood in these classrooms, and every family who trusted us with their children, thank you. It is long overdue." Walter cleared his throat. He leaned slightly toward the microphone someone had handed him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, simply, "I just wanted to be useful. That's all I ever wanted." He handed the microphone back and walked toward the side exit, and the room watched him go. Marcus found him 20 minutes later near the parking lot, loading cleaning supplies into the back of a plain white maintenance van. His suit jacket was off. He was sweating slightly in the May heat. He heard Marcus's footsteps and turned. Marcus didn't have a speech prepared. He hadn't thought about what he was going to say. He just stopped a few feet away and said, "I'm sorry. What I said in there, it was wrong. I've been treating you wrong for years, and I didn't even notice I was doing it. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse." Walter studied him for a moment. He had kind eyes. That was the thing Marcus noticed, standing close to him for the first time. Kind and tired and completely without bitterness. "It makes it honest," Walter said. "That's a start." "Why?" Marcus asked. "Why do it this way? You could have had your name on everything. You could have been on the board. Why sweep floors?" Walter closed the van door and leaned against it. He was quiet for a moment. "When I was about your age," he said, "I made my first serious amount of money. And the first thing I did was start treating people differently, depending on how much they reminded me of myself. I thought that was just how the world worked." He looked at his hands. "It took me a long time to understand that what I was really doing was deciding who deserved my attention and who didn't. And most of the people I overlooked, they were the ones who were actually doing the work." He looked at Marcus. "I didn't want to be that person anymore. So I found a way to stay close to the work. Does that make sense?" Marcus nodded slowly. He wasn't sure it did, completely, but he thought he might spend a long time thinking about it. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, honestly, have you ever dismissed someone the way Marcus dismissed Walter? Have you ever looked at someone's job or their clothes or the thing they were carrying and decided in 3 seconds that their story wasn't worth knowing? Because most of us have. And this story isn't about judging Marcus Cole. It's about recognizing that quiet, almost automatic instinct in ourselves and asking what it costs us. What connections we miss. What lessons we walk right past because we were too certain we already knew what we were looking at. In the months that followed, Marcus Cole deferred his entry into his father's real estate company, a decision that shocked Raymond Cole deeply and led to several long, difficult conversations. He spent the summer volunteering with a community development nonprofit in Bridgeport, Connecticut, working primarily in low-income housing renovation. He told one interviewer later that he was deeply uncomfortable for most of it, and that the discomfort was probably the most valuable thing that had ever happened to him. Walter James retired from Harrington Academy the following December, after 23 years. At the small, private retirement gathering the faculty organized, held in the school library after hours, nothing elaborate, just the way Walter wanted it. Principal Abernethy presented him with a framed photograph of the school taken in 1999, just before he had stepped in, and one taken the day of the 2025 graduation. Walter looked at both of them for a long time. He didn't say much. He just said, "Good years." The 12 annual scholarships he had funded continued, and would continue for another 30 years under the terms of the endowment he had established. In the 2026 graduating class, one of the recipients was a young woman named Destiny, the daughter of a school bus driver, who went on to study environmental engineering at the University of Michigan. She never knew who had funded her scholarship, but on the day she graduated, she made sure to thank every single person who worked in her university's facilities department by name. She had heard the story. It stayed with her. There is something Walter James said during that brief moment at the microphone, something quiet that almost got lost in the applause, that has stayed with everyone who was in that room. I just wanted to be useful, not celebrated, not credited, not recognized, just useful. And isn't that, when you strip everything else away, what most of us actually want? To matter to the people around us, to show up and do something that makes things a little better, to be seen, not for what we own or what our title is, but for what we do when no one is watching. The hard part is that Walter James had to become invisible to remember that. He had to trade in a life of recognition for a mop and a faded uniform and 23 years of early mornings, because that was the only way he knew to stay honest with himself. Most of us won't do that. Most of us can't. But we can do something smaller and just as important. We can look up. We can learn the name of the person who cleans our office building, who fixes our school's broken lockers, who shows up before everyone else and leaves after everyone else and never once asks for applause. We can choose to see them, not because they might secretly be wealthy, that's not the point, but because they are people, and people carry stories that will change you if you let them. So here's what I want to leave you with today. The next time you walk past someone and your brain tries to sort them quickly into a category, useful or not useful, important or not important, worth my attention or not worth it, I want you to feel this story push back against that instinct. I want you to think about Walter James arriving at 5:45 in the morning in a building full of people who never thought to ask his name, doing work that held the whole place together. And I want you to ask yourself, who in my life am I not seeing clearly? Because there is almost certainly someone. There usually is. What would you have done if you were Marcus, standing in that hallway? Would you have had the courage to go and apologize? And if you found out that someone you had dismissed for years had quietly shaped the course of your life, what would that feel like? Let us know in the comments. These conversations matter, and we read every single one. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And subscribe if you haven't already, because the next story we're telling is just as real, just as human, and just as much about the people we overlook without ever meaning to. The janitor who built the school never needed a plaque. He just needed a purpose. And in 23 years of early mornings and quiet hallways, he found it, over and over again. Some people leave their names on buildings. Walter James left his in people. And that, in the end, is the only monument that lasts.
Hey there. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. We really appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And guess what? The story doesn't end here. Click on the video right here on your screen to dive into another fascinating story. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. Once again, thanks for being a part of this amazing community. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring stories that move you.